Hey, welcome everyone to Lead Wisco. My name is Troy Murphy. I'm one of your hosts, and I have my partner here to my right, Ryan Kibbe. How are you, Ryan?
I'm so glad you didn't say partner in crime. It's just bad for business, Troy, if we go that route.
Yeah, it is. No. Probably so.
Pastors have never been called criminals before, but you're the real deal. You are the real deal. So,
well, it's just such a privilege to be able to doing this. I know we keep talking about we learn. We feel like we're interviewing people, and I know you usually have your notebook out draining people for more information and wisdom, which is awesome. But
I love these every time. In fact, we talk about this. I will have a reflecting point after each one of these to kind of chew on. So
and that's our hope. I really think for everybody out there is that this is these are stories, people's real lives, and we purposely don't do really hardly any editing, but we just have a real conversation with people about who they are in leadership. So today we have someone, Dave Bushnell. He's a part of the Global Leadership Network. He's one of the field team people there, and it looks like we just brought him in right away.
Hi, Dave.
There we are. Our producer brought him in. Dave, I didn't even get finished that you're working on an EDD in leadership development and cultural development. So, Dave, welcome.
Hey, thanks. It is a joy to be here, Troy, Ryan. Awesome to be with you, and love what y'all are doing. It's really, really cool.
I hear it's really, really warm out there, and so I just recommend you hydrate with one of these things here too.
With one of those, I've got way smaller. Oh, if I put it close to the camera, it just got bigger. So now I'm right with you.
Amen.
There's something about you just had that, and you had an American flag.
I just had to do that.
This is another podcast for another time, but anyway.
Threw us down the wrong path there.
Hey, the part of what we want to know is just a little bit of your story, and it'll probably give texture and shape to kind of where you've gotten to where you are today. So, Dave, kind of run us through your story a little bit, where you grew up, and how you landed yourself now at the Global Leadership Network.
I was an Air Force brat, so grew up in a lot of different places, spent the most number of years in New Jersey. And so we consider ourselves, my wife and I, East Coast, Midwest folk. We've been married 25 years yesterday.
Congratulations. Wow. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, we're over the moon about that. And I'm a career pastor. So we started in youth ministry for 12 years in Ohio, and then in Pittsburgh, and then out in Bellingham, Washington. And so we live in Spokane, Washington now. So the church that we served in Bellingham, Washington, when we moved there, I was already a fan of the Global Leadership Summit, and the church was already hosting, and it was needing a kind of somebody to run point with it. And so I said, hey, can I play with that? And I had transitioned to one of the roles that is on the senior team that serves the adult ministry stuff, so it kind of fit well that way. And it ended up growing pretty significantly as a host site. And then the summit team called and said, "Hey, would you join our team? Because what you're doing there is great, and you can help churches all over the Western U.S." And I said no. And that's where I'm at today. Obviously, there was a little more kicking of the tires both ways, and figured out it was the right fit. So started with the GLN 7 years ago.
Wow. So you had your Jonah moment.
Jonah moment. That's right. No, not doing it.
Yeah, and he spit you right back up there. Well, give us a little bit of texture then to kind of what does a field team person do? And I know you probably have some special gifts and skill sets that you bring to the table. What are those, Dave? Because I know you love leadership, and I know you love leadership culture.
Yeah. So the each of us on the field team kind of brings our own gifting and expression to the team and to what we do. So we're charged with making the world safer for the Global Leadership Summit. And that's a broad charge. Now, we work with host sites and that are churches, that are businesses, organizations that seek to leverage the summit as a resource for change in their communities. So that looks a little different in every community because every community has a different set of needs. Every host has a different vision on their heart about what they want to engage. And so we do our best to create flexible tools and cast some vision and work with strategy to help these host sites to bring about transformation in their local communities. So that might look like a church that is passionate about investing in Christian leadership. That might look like a nonprofit that is bringing a variety of sectors together to do collaborative work in their city. But the GLS becomes a platform to deliver whatever the local vision is. And so it's our job to kind of help tease out what is that local vision and how do we support it.
So I'm an Enneagram 3. I don't know what you are, Dave.
I'm a 3 wing 4. Yep.
Yeah, that's me too.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So so we project well put together. Usually there's quite a bit of unrest and some self-image issues. So I'm going to get a little bit counselor, but I think there's I think passion comes from.
I love it when he does this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passion comes from often an experience we've had in our past that we just said, I don't want to feel that anymore. And I am passionate about this because of some of that. Is there anything in you growing up that you either witnessed or saw, or a moment with family or friends that started to shape your passion for where it is today?
So, good question. I think, when I think about the first time I saw myself as a leader was when Mrs. Defina in high school, when I was a freshman, said, hey, why don't you run for Future Business Leaders of America office? And I thought, why I don't get it. Why would I do that? And so here's somebody who saw something in me and drew it out, put me in situations where picture, I'm a high school sophomore at this point, standing in front of a whole bunch of my peers at the state level, and they're grilling me as I run for state office. And in that moment, I learned about speaking. I learned about sharp answers, which obviously I've degraded since then, with what we're doing now. But my point is, I had this exposure to opportunity to lead that I never would have had unless somebody tapped me and invited me to it. So that has grown my thinking in terms of what are the best practices? How do we create a culture where people get tapped on the shoulder and given opportunity to lead, specific opportunity? Here's what we need. Here are the deliverables. You're the person to do that. We see value. We see possibility in you. I believe it starts there. And without opportunity, then where are we really leading?
Yeah, that's so good.
I would love for you said you were, obviously you pastored, and my thought on that, what you're doing now, you're probably pastoring in a different vein, but you're still pastoring. But my question would be, what was, when you talked about, I said no, and now obviously it's a yes. What, maybe for people going through a career shift, you were here, but now you're there, and now you're going to a new place. But what was that like for you in the decision process of kicking those tires? And how did you, can you walk people through the how? Not just, you got your why, but what was the how in that transition?
Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize my responsibility to steward who God created me to be. So that's at the intersection of self-awareness, of gifting, of experiences, and intersection of self-awareness and environment, where I got to place myself in environments where that makeup can become increasingly alive. And so as I was going through that particular transition, the reason I said no initially was because of the travel. There was a fair amount of travel that was involved, and we have 5 kids. And that just didn't seem congruent to the family life that we were interested in. And as I had more conversation, I discovered actually the travel is completely at my discretion, and so I can mold and shape that. So to answer your question specifically, Ryan, it's looking and saying, does this opportunity put me in environments to a greater degree where I get to steward who I am to a greater degree? Do I have more opportunity to live out the best version of me that I am? And as I leaned into that, zeroing in a little bit more specifically on leadership development was an attractive thing.
And that, and I'm not saying that this was you, but I've talked to a lot of pastors over the years, and some have remained pastors, others transitioned out. One of the things I've heard regularly from people who've transitioned out is, I had to get past the identity piece of the title of being a pastor. You're laughing.
I'm laughing because it took me 4 years to do
Really?
that. Yeah,
Really?
that
4
was
years.
very, very challenging work because, and I've done a lot of reflection on this from the standpoint of pastors, in order to do well in our vocation, it directly draws from all that God has created us to be, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, physically, all of it. And there's this linkage to our spiritual well-being with our vocation, and it's very, very hard to separate, to the extent that we even start to think my spiritual well-being is indicated by my vocational performance.
Wow.
And so if we look at those metrics and those metrics are not doing well, whatever they are in a given ministry, then we start to think there must be something wrong with me spiritually. It's so interwoven. So you take me out of the local church. It was really, really a challenge for a long time around, well, now who am I? And so I like you said, I do get to do a lot of pastoring, but the way I personally made my peace with it was, okay, I elevated the regard for local church pastors that much more. And I'm not serving as a local church pastor presently. And so that was my way of kind of separating that. Okay, I get to support pastors in a parachurch way. But for me personally, I kind of did this step. Okay, I'm not a local church pastor. So I had to go through a process to get to that point of making that conscious separation. Tried to hold on to both for a long time.
Yeah, it seems like identity,
That's what I was hearing too.
in any kind of thing, any kind of role in leadership is, and you made a comment, awareness is the first step for us in growth. Then we have to begin to have tools to actually start to work with it, because you can be aware of your story, aware of some of the pain, the trauma you've gone through, but then you got to actually start to do the work. So some of the work I've been doing, and I'm going to form a question here, is in some of the quadrants, which you probably have done some research in that, but it's not foreign to Christians, because Jesus says it. Mind, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. If we were to use those archetypes or those kind of metaphors for our lives, it seems like, Dave, leadership, and I know we're a part of a conference that's a day and a half, and it's that, but a lot of it is mind and strength that actually feeds into the idea of you got to perform it. So can you talk a little bit about what does it look like as a leader to dive into heart and soul? Even if people don't have a faith that are listening or watching, there's that core sense of the beliefs, the things that you believe are true, but then there's this emotional part of you. How does that play into leadership? How have you researched that and seen that work?
So here's where I might start on that is that leadership, we often talk about the, 360 degree type of endeavors when it comes to leadership. So it's, if we apply that, we say leadership up, leadership laterally, and leadership down. And if we do label some percentages on that, I learned this at the summit probably 20 years ago. Leadership up is about 20% of our leadership energy. Leadership laterally, leading those to whom we are accountable, or those that are in similar roles, is 25%. Leadership down is only 5%. So that leaves 50% of leadership is self-leadership. And we think about, okay, what is self-leadership? And the way that I get to that is everything that can be said about leadership. So you pick up any book, any piece of content, anything, apply that to yourself.
Yeah.
How am I casting vision? How am I allocating myself? How am I inspiring? How am I motivating? How am I building unity within me, myself, and I? All the different pieces that God created me to be. All of it is applicable. We just flip it in terms of a mirror. So when I think about leading myself, I try to think, okay, how would I go about, what is the counsel I would give to a team? How would I go about motivating others? I'm just going to reflect and apply that to me. Now, I need to add, of course, the holistic dimensions to it, the intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And so it's self-care on all of those things. I'm a huge believer in knowing specifically what fills your tanks and also what drains your tanks, being able to label those. And so that I've got thoughts on each one of the aspects of who I am, right? Physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Each one of those, I know what fills me and I know what drains me. And then the goal is, how do I limit what drains me and increase what fills me so that I can be at my level best in as many situations as I possibly can. Now, that may actually mean pacing through the day. So I'm a competitive runner, so I think about pacing a good bit.
Right.
But if I know that this evening is going to be a heavy lift with maybe a difficult conversation with one of my kids, I'm actually going to make sure that I structure my day so that I am ready for that energy burst later in the day. That's resource allocation in leadership that I'm reflecting then onto myself. So how do we go, pacing, how do we go with what drains and what fills? So there's a whole bunch there, but those are some of my initial thoughts.
Those are good. I mean, I think, obviously
I was writing some stuff down.
You were self-care. He's taking notes.
I am.
Any kind of self-care obviously is important. And maybe a part two to this question is, I find myself not discouraged, but realizing maybe the largest topic available today is leadership books and seminars, and you can get master classes.
Yep.
And so you can do a lot of mind and strength. What I don't find is a lot of heart and soul around leadership. So probably more of recent, and Dave, EQ has become a buzzword. And so you can know about EQ, but actually doing EQ is very different. And if you can't give to somebody something that you don't have for yourself. So if you know it, mind, and you're just trying to do EQ, it actually doesn't work. So there is this component that it does feel a little bit like a barren desert on the idea of heart and soul, which tends to then get pitched into the faith sector. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's touchy-feely, that's spiritual. And yet, I guess maybe and I'm answering the question, but maybe you talk about that a bit. Are there some examples of leaders that are doing that kind of work that's not just get stuff done and know a bunch of stuff? Because a lot of what you just talked about is tactical.
Yeah, a lot is tactical, and at the same time, if we delve into it a little bit more and we talk about what it is that fills us and what it is that drains us, we've got to become aware of. So that sounds tactical, and at the same time, there's a lot of self-awareness that's there. Because it's not just about the tasks. So the heart of the leader is the heart of the ministry. And so whatever our ministry is, if it's vocational ministry, if it's in business, if it's in nonprofit sector, whatever, we're all cleverly disguised as ministers. So our heart, that's the limiting factor. So I think oftentimes we look and we say, okay, leaders have to have it all together. Leaders have to be strong. Leaders have to have it figured out. And so we buy that lie.
Yeah.
And it then covers over what you were just mentioning about those softer or touchy-feely things. We dismiss those. Well, those aren't part of the leadership discipline. but it's actually, I mean, it couldn't be more wrong, because those are actually the core of the leadership discipline.
Yeah.
In Psalm 78:72, it says, it talks about David, and it says that David shepherded them with integrity of heart
Yeah. Yeah.
and led them with skill of hand. And in my mind, this is a beautiful picture of leadership, right? There's skill of hand, there's leadership competency,
Yep.
but then it also talked about integrity of heart. And so it indicates a very different journey that's there for David, where he stewards himself, he grows his heart, that his skill might be the outspring from it. And so I think tending to our hearts is absolutely critical. And so that's knowing, where is it that we are experiencing brokenness right now. One of my favorite questions is this, y'all. It's, what's that about? So and what I mean by that is, if I have a disproportionate reaction to something that just happened in my life.
Yep.
So, okay, I break a pencil and I fly off the handle. Well, that's clearly not about me breaking a pencil. That's about something else. And so I can use me flying off the handle to say, okay, what's that about? What really is going on here that caused me to fly off the handle? Is there some relationship that is in tension right now? Is there a degree of anxiety that I've got about an upcoming project, individual, conversation? Is there some area of my life that is not congruent with the beliefs that I hold? All of these things can be feeders that actually cause us to have a disproportionate and an inappropriate reaction. And so this is where we're tying back to that self-awareness. So it's asking ourselves those tough questions.
Yeah. And you go to, what do I feel? And then, why do I feel this? And then tracing the wire back to somewhere in your past where you started to believe a lie and employed some sort of strategy. So flying off the handle may be what you figured out how to do so you didn't feel so bad about yourself, or because you feel so bad about yourself, this is what you're doing. Yeah. Very interesting, that kind of work. So what are you noticing about leadership today, Dave, where you're seeing maybe some of the positives, but maybe some of the underbelly of leadership gone awry? Is there, I guess, examples or things you're just noticing about leadership in general?
One of the things I'm noticing is the emphasis on okay, if you look at leadership development as an industry, the industry comes out of this need that organizations have for exceptional leaders. And I was just reading statistics the other day where HR professionals say that the bench strength of their organizations, so this is 14,000 HR professionals, say that the bench strength, they would rate it as good or very good. Only 18% of them would rate it. So we've got a deficit in leadership quality. So the answer to that is too often, well, then let's host a class, or let's impart skill. And what we're actually missing is the implementation of that skill. That's where the absence is in the leadership practice. It's, who is it that I'm in community with that knows the next steps that I'm taking in order to get better as a leader? Who is it that knows the practice of leadership that I'm currently trying to improve? We view leadership as this solitary journey, this solitary endeavor, and it's devoid of working with other leaders who are helping to make us get better. And that brings in, as Henry Cloud talks about, the power of the other, right? This external force that's going to help me. Hey, Dave, remember you are working on X right now. So how is that happening? I think that's where the major void is. It's in transferring the knowledge about leadership to the application of leadership. The leadership development industry is very, very weak in that area. And so that's actually part of the research that I'm doing in my doctorate. And There's huge emphasis on the, the what we impart, and very, very little emphasis in how that gets contextualized in our leadership sphere.
What you're talking about, and I'm going to throw a scripture out, make this legal, ratify this church meeting here. But Jesus
Dave
said,
already did one.
Yeah, he did. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's what Jesus said, right? So the word "know" is actually from the context experiential. So it's not head knowledge, truth that I know of leadership principles. It is the forged in the fire experiential element of the truth of leadership. And I think what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that part of our job is to create greenhouse environments, ecosystems where people can use their laboratory skills and make mistakes experientially. That's part of what you're saying. We need to do a better job in our businesses, governments, homes, churches, wherever, setting up systems for that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You are spot on, and that's both the research that I'm looking at upholds exactly what you said, as well as in practice as I work with churches and businesses specifically. The number one area that they're unclear on is the definition of a leader. What is it in this specific church, in this specific organization, that we would define as a leader? And then once we define that, how do we create leadership opportunities that reflect and live out that definition? And the more opportunities we create, the bigger our capacity gets as a church or an organization to accomplish our mission. That's a key. We often limit the definition of, we often limit who are my leaders to, okay, well, there's this very small number of folks, and we're missing an enormous amount of possibility and potential. So yeah, creating opportunity to lead is absolutely critical. And the research says this, and in practice, we know this. That's critical to that transfer of skill. Where is it that I have a chance to apply what it is that I'm learning? And then who's giving me some feedback about that? Who's giving me some coaching as I deploy these skills? So we've got to create more opportunity. And we could go on and on about how to create those opportunities and that kind of a thing.
Because if you're in a business, the bottom line is, for a lot of businesses, I'm not saying all, but for a lot, their why is the profit margins.
Sure.
There are businesses that they attach their why to something larger, something that's outside of them, which is awesome. But the end game then, what I'm hearing you say, is having an environment where there are coaches who are championing you. It doesn't matter where, in the value of experiential coaching. And so the coach gets to go. I just had this week where I had a staff member come to me and said, Ryan, they said all the right things, but something beneath what they said, how they said, did not sit right with me. And then I responded and coached them and said, hey, maybe it's not the problem that they're communicating. Maybe it's the problem beneath the problem, and ask them to share with them how you experienced them and have a dialogue about that. And they're like, yeah, that's it. And it was just a simple back and forth, but it took the weight of this person off their shoulders, because now they have a game plan because they've been coached on how to deal with emotional issues. That's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And in fact, this is a change that's happening in workforce development, is moving from managers to coaches. Okay. And we're very, very early in that shift. But managers are actually way better leaders when they're coaching, when they're doing exactly what you just described. And so there's this switch that's happening in leadership development toward, how do we increase this coaching skill and be able to look at something and ask, what's the question behind the question, and everything you just mentioned is,
and
that's
taking
extremely
the pause
effective.
to do that, Dave, as opposed to, because one of the mistakes I made and have made and hopefully won't make anymore is, hey, we need to move on to this in the meeting, and then I miss a moment because I'm so bent on driving to the next thing. I've just steamrolled over everybody in the meeting to get to the next thing that's important to me, and I missed a coaching moment in the meeting. And what I think I'm hearing, and what Troy is after when he's talking about heart leadership, is we don't miss those moments for the heart.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to this dialogue because I want to push a little bit and say I'm a 3 with an Enneagram of 4. Again, Dave apologized for me for that, but I realize
I'll drink.
how long my leadership and self-image was about getting it done, knowing it and getting it done. Mind and strength, mind and strength, mind and strength. For years, I went to counseling. So I was mind. Oh, and now I know where that came from. Now I'm going to fix it. Okay. That does not change culture. In fact, it just perpetuated a culture that our staff works their tail off. They get stuff done because they know what I've perpetuated and what I've modeled for culture is you need to learn and be a learner, and then you need to get stuff done. I think the aha for me is, and I think that's, Dave, where some of your research is going is, and even what you're saying, Ryan, about greenhouses. It wasn't until I started to be more aware and then exercise that in the culture. I didn't even have to provide the space. I just started to exercise it myself. For instance, when I thought it was passion and strong leadership, my voice will get a little bit higher. Now, I'm not arguing with people, and people think I'm intense, I'm upset. I'm not upset. But I used to just think it was passion, and I realized it was fear. And here's what I started to say. Hey, listen, I'm feeling some fear. So I'll give you a perfect example. We have opened our church doors. We're half of the number that we used to be. We have half new people. Because I'm a visionary and kind of think ahead, I'm looking, and if we don't start to focus on getting people in the room for actual physical momentum, we're having a problem. What I'm learning to say is I'm checking in with fear. I have some fear. I'm a little afraid that I'm going to have to reduce staff or cut budgets and feel all that pain I've felt when we've had to do that in the past. And so my intensity right now is really around my own fear because of how I grew up. That said, can we have a really hard conversation about this? And it just changes the room.
And you did this?
Oh, yeah.
You had the guts to do that.
Yeah, it changes the room. And I'm realizing kind of what you're saying is it's not as much as me saying, and I think a lot of top leaders of organizations or churches say, well, let's fix the staff and the worker bees. And they're reluctant to do their own self-work because you can send everybody to organizational development. You can send them into EQ classes. If the senior leader's not modeling it, that is going to perpetuate and define culture more than anything else. Anyway, I didn't even ask a question there. I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited.
Well, he said it. Dave said it. The heart of the leader is what comes forth.
Yeah. Do you have any comments to any of that?
My comment is you just shared kind of a little bit of your journey about what was driving you was fear. I'll share a little bit about mine in that as an Enneagram 3, constantly wanting to achieve, constantly wanting to perform and get an A. And so we look for, well, what gives me an A? Mm-hmm. And for me, what gave me the A when I was an unhealthy 3 is is people pleasing. I've got to get everybody to think well of me, but think like he's the best. Like it's A plus.
That is so me.
If you get an A minus, well, you might as well get an F. I mean, that's just
right. I agree. Yeah. If you're not the best,
just blow it all.
Yeah, just throw it all out. So it took a while for me to come to the point of doing that inner work. That, hey, wait a second. I am interacting with this individual right now so that they think that I'm the best. And I mean, that throws out, organizational development or metrics or whatever. That's all I was trying to do in those moments. And I had to come to a point of realizing that as leaders, we're not always there for a popularity contest, right? It's about asking the hard questions. It's about making tough decisions and doing that in a way that expresses care and love for people.
Yeah.
So where I reoriented was looking and saying, okay, getting an A is knowing myself really well, what I believe in really well, and I get an A if I don't betray that. That's where that's how. So in this dialogue, if I'm talking to somebody that I'm leading, and I have to, I'm telling them something that they don't want to hear, they're not going to think well of my decision. Perhaps I need to help them to feel well about themselves, that they're cared for,
Yeah.
that they're loved,
Yeah.
even though we're making a hard call.
Yeah. It's funny. Another thing I've done and I've learned about myself, Dave, if we're like twins in this area, it could be, but if you give me too much time to think and figure it out in isolation, I am so far ahead of people and it uninvites anybody to the journey. So I've realized I have to say, hey guys, I'm going to start thinking about this. Can you start thinking about this? Can we come back and talk about it next week? Knowing full well I'm going to start thinking about it. Or I have to invite somebody in right away going, hey, can we brainstorm this? Because this is just at the top of my head. And I'm afraid that if I get too far ahead of you, I'm going to have an agenda. I'm going to already be thinking the solution without inviting you into the process. So I think there's some practices like that I think you're right. As leaders, as you're more self-aware, you have to, the phrase I've been using with Transform Leader is I have to do my work and I have to show up. Showing up means, can I really show up heart and soul, mind and strength to every moment that I have? Now, I don't know if you want to speak about this, but I'll tell you what, I have 4 daughters. My wife, married 32 years. That is the crucible of figuring all this out. It makes work easy to me. Quite frankly, I mean, honestly, my family makes what I do at work really easy. Because, and not that they're difficult, it's just difficult because they know you. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little bit, about how this is transferred, leadership development and culture in your family.
Oh boy, the greatest leadership challenge in my life is our parenting, because we have 5 children, 4 of whom are adopted internationally. And so they each come with some significant trauma from their background. Yeah. And so the way that plays in our family dynamic is challenging at times. And so when I go to work, I go on vacation. It's I can relate to what you're describing there, Troy. And because they, these are the people that see us really, like, you can't mask up in the family dynamic. And so you want to do some self-awareness, like you want to find out where you're at on those metrics, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. Ask your family. What does your family think? And that'll give you that'll reveal some blind spots that may have been there. And so there's also, to speak to parents specifically that, or family dynamics, that may be particularly challenging. The way that I've looked at that is to say, how has God placed this relationship in my life so that I can grow? Yeah. This isn't about them changing. This is about me growing and improving. And it's those relationships that we have the biggest opportunity to grow ourselves, because of the fact that they do reveal our blind spots. Yeah. So yeah.
That's good.
I do want to say I really appreciated you talking about family, because I know for my kids, I'm learning when my kids go through adversity, my number one thing is that Dad wants to go in and, Troy, fix it. And one of the things that I'm not allowed to do in a lot of things now, that I'm becoming more self-aware about me, is because Dad wants to fix it. Because what is Dad doing all the time at work? Solving, dealing with dilemmas and problems. And one of the things I'm having to learn at home is be a better coach too, and invite them into making those decisions as well. And so, like, I'll give you an example. My daughter, she's a track fiend. She is super fast. But her response in the last year, she has gone from kind of just apathetic about certain things to, we had one crucial conversation as a dad. And in that 1 year, she has done a complete 180. I mean, hitting goals. And then he Lord kind of spoke to me and said, pay attention to that because she's crushing goals and you encouraged her to do that. And there's areas of your life that you were like her a year ago. So now I'm being coached by my daughter's actions. So it comes
good.
back to me. So I was like, oh yeah, I need to show up every day. Every day I'm here at work. And I mean, she's weightlifting and all this stuff. And I'm just, I'm just getting convicted. And she's saying nothing except her actions are speaking to me. They're really preaching. So I'm learning. I think it's give and take.
I know that
Yeah.
parenting, I would say, I actually think gets harder as the kids get older because it's really easy when your kids are young. Hey, we don't do that. Stop doing that. Have a timeout, whatever you do. Mm-hmm. Then they're grown-ups and they're out of your house and they're doing stuff and you're like,
I wouldn't do that.
and you want to fix it, right?
You wanna
but you
fix it.
can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a good marker. I know my daughters, you're saying, Dave, our kids shape us. The situation God places us in is in some ways the boot camp for us to be grown and to learn how to steward what he's giving us. But I know one of my daughters, they're all girls, obviously, and so they can be more expressive emotionally. Not that they're more emotional, but they can more. And I know Jackie would say to me, hey, Dad, you're talking a lot in the car, and I just need to cry right now. Can you just let me cry for about 15 minutes and not say anything? And so sure enough, I'm driving, and she's weeping. I'm like, this is uncomfortable. I want to fix her from crying because I don't want to feel why she's feeling that. So it's very interesting work, parenting, I think. And in some ways, it's a gift, I think, that God gives us. I mean, I think the blessings part of it, we keep thinking is all good things. I actually think it's sharpening things.
And those kingdom principles play out. You couldn't fix her. She needed permission to be herself.
yeah.
Well, guess what? You probably are going to have a team member who needs to just let it out and without fixing it and just let them get it out. They all apply.
Kat, our producer, cries all the time. She's always crying, and I just don't feel the urge to fix it anymore. I just let her do that. She's got to do it. She's got to cry, which is great.
I love it.
Well, I know that there's so much more to go here. And Dave, maybe to finish up with this, is there something you're just passionate to tell leaders today? If there's one thing you could kind of leave leaders with that you feel like hasn't been said yet, but what would you just tell leaders of all shapes and sizes, roles, whatever that might be?
So lately, the thing that I've been leaning into with leadership growth is peer coaching, and I would encourage you as a leader to ask the question: who is it that I am on this leadership growth journey with, and how are we sharpening each other as leaders, and get specific about that with what is my current challenge and bring a plan to that person and then have that person level it up, because it will be better if you share it with another leader who is outside that lane, perhaps. They'll make your plan better. And so we're not on this journey alone. Let's admit we don't have to have it all figured out. Actually, let's admit we don't have it all figured out. And then let's tap into the power of other leaders that are on this journey with us, to help level us up.
Oh, that's good. That's
Awesome.
good. Good stuff, huh?
Good word.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much, Dave, for being with us.
My pleasure.
You.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, if I could just tell our listeners, there'll be some show notes about information about what Dave's doing and the GLN, and would just, if you want to get in touch with him, you'll be able to do that. But thanks for watching or listening. Like, comment, and share. We'll see you soon. Lead Wisco.
You have influence every day. You impact those around you during a season that may have left you in the dark. This can be a new day for your leadership. Join hundreds of thousands of growth-minded, change-driven women and men for the premier leadership event of 2021.
I wanna feel good.
Learn from world-class leaders like Craig Rochelle, champion of the GLS. He will help us expand our capacity for uncertainty, pain, and chaos. Workplace civility expert Shola Richards will show us ways to turn around the thoughts that weaken us so we can experience peak mental health fitness. Returning for her third time to the summit, Juliet Funt will be sharing fresh new content from her first and much anticipated book, A Minute to Think. Best-selling author of Outliers, The Tipping Point, Talking to Strangers, and many others, Malcolm Gladwell is crafting a talk specifically for the GLS that will be relevant to all we've been facing in our world these days. Bianca Althoff, founder of In the Name of Love, is going to share ways to step into leadership when feeling reluctant. Global head of Adidas Basketball, Jerry Lorenzo, will be interviewed by Craig Rochelle. Their discussion will identify how conviction, intention, and empathy can drive our organizations forward. General Stanley McChrystal, best-selling author of Team of Teams, will be there to offer a new system by which we can detect and respond to risk. Also joining the faculty this August, Dr. Francesca Gino will help us identify and cultivate rebel talent so we can evolve and prosper in this current environment. Jamie Kern Lima, founder of IT Cosmetics, Michelle Polar will show us the difference between being fearless and being brave and how we can overcome our fears. Richard Montañez, the godfather of flaming hot Cheetos and Hispanic branding. Rich Wilkerson Jr., lead pastor of VOO Church. Ebakan Awashika. Ebakan is an amazing leader who is so respected in Africa that she is sought after by many large organizations to speak to their leadership and guide their boards. Dr. Henry Cloud will contextualize and address the struggles all leaders experience on the mental health continuum. A.R. Bernard will be interviewed by Paula Ferris. Finally, Albert Tate will close out the summit with his unique style that combines humor and storytelling, inspiration and conviction, grace and truth. Join us for 2 days of insights and inspiration. Wherever you have influence, your leadership matters.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. We hope you learned from Dave's wealth of leadership knowledge and that you are encouraged to tap someone on the shoulder and invite them to an opportunity to lead. We also hope that you learned more about the Global Leadership Summit and will consider joining us this August 5th and 6th. We hope to see you there. If this episode was helpful to you, we'd be so grateful if you subscribed or followed us, left us a review, or shared our podcast with someone you think may benefit from it. If you're looking for more leadership content, check out our social media. We post snippets of these episodes, leadership development resources, and more. If there's someone you think would be a great guest for us to talk to, message us on social media or send us an email at leadwisco@gbcc.me. Thanks for listening.